What's next? Go to financialsurvivalnetwork.com and sign up for your free weekly newsletter. You'll also get 3 free reports. The Financial Survival Network. It's all about what's next.
And welcome. You're listening to the Financial Survival Network, and I'm Kerry Lutz. And next guest, you've heard many times. He's been right about the crash of '08 and '09. He'll be right about the next crash, whenever that's going to occur. But he still don't get no respect from the mainstream media, and probably never will. I'm talking about Peter Schiff, who's CEO of Euro Pacific Capital. And Peter, welcome.
Oh, thanks for having me on.
Hey, so we had an election, and big deal, right? We got the Republicans. What do you look forward to happening there?
Well, not much. It's going to kind of be the status quo. And I think, ironically, there are people that might be enthusiastic having the Republicans in control of Congress now, thinking that, well, this is better, right? Better than the Democrats, and maybe there's going to be some substantive change. Maybe there's going to be entitlement reform. Maybe there might be some cuts to government spending. See, none of that's going to happen because President Obama is not going to sign on to any of that. But also, I think that the Republicans that were elected were very moderate Republicans. I mean, these are not Tea Party type guys. Those guys lost in the primary this time. It was all the old guard, Demopublicans, neocons, the Republicans that you really can't tell from Democrats that won. And if you look at some of the states too that voted for Republican senators and got rid of Democratic incumbents, the people also voted to raise the minimum wage in those states. So it wasn't that the voters were voting for Republican principles. They weren't voting for less government, right? More free market capitalism. They were just voting out of frustration because the economy is lousy and everybody's pretending that it's good. And so they want to send a message to the president or Congress, hey, the economy's not good. My circumstances stink, and I'm just voting Republican because because the Democrats are in charge. And so the Republicans now kind of, backed into controlling the Senate. And the last thing they want to do is lose the power they just got, because now you got the senators on the Republican side. They chair the committees. They have the bigger offices. They have more prestige when they're in the majority. They don't want to lose that majority. And so they don't want to risk doing anything that might jeopardize their reelection. So I think what's going to happen is as the economy weakens in 2015 and we're headed back to recession, they don't want to be responsible. And they don't want Obama to be able to run against Congress, or not run, but just basically, beat up Congress and get his popularity to rise by shifting the blame for the weakening economy to the obstructionist, do-nothing Republican Congress refuses to pass any of his bills. Mm-hmm. And I also think for 2016, the presidential election, if the economy is weak, they could easily blame it on the Republican Congress. I mean, if the Democrats still had the Senate, that would be hard to do, and the Democrats would have more ownership of the recession. But if the Republicans are in Congress, then they could own the economy instead of the Democrats, and I think they're worried about that. And so because of that, I think they're going to want to compromise as much as possible with the president to get stuff done so that they can't be blamed for obstructing the things that he wanted to do, because if he doesn't get the things that he wants, he can always blame the economy on the failure of the Republicans to work with him and pass his bills. So I think they're going to want to pass something, and that's going to be dangerous, because what they're going to pass is going to be more government spending, gimmicky tax cuts, probably an increase in minimum wage. All this stuff is going to weaken, not strengthen the economy, but it's going to be good politics for the Republicans.
Right. So it's just window dressing effectively, and they're not really going to do what they were voted to do, like repeal Obamacare. It's just not going to happen.
They're not going to repeal Obamacare because Obama is not going to sign the repeal of Obamacare. So repealing Obamacare is going to be contingent on electing a Republican in 2016 and keeping control of the House and Senate in Republican hands. But even then, by then, it might be hard to just outright repeal it when there are going to be so many voters who are dependent on it. So who knows what they're going to end up doing. But yes, most people don't like Obamacare because they have worse coverage that costs them more money.
Yeah.
And that was the truth. Those were the lies that, now it's out in the open that the Obama administration was telling. They had to lie to the American people because if they told them the truth, well, they're too stupid to understand that that this is for their own good. So if they would have leveled with the American public and said it means you're going to have to pay more for insurance and healthy people are going to have to pay more so that the sick can pay less. And if you like your insurance now, you can't keep it because you're going to lose your policy and you're going to get forced to pay more for something you don't want, right? Nobody would have voted for it.
Right.
But so they had to lie. But the irony of it is, the American public in general is pretty stupid. But in this case, the Obama administration is even stupider because the American public, as dumb as they are not that dumb. They could have figured out that this was a bad deal. It's only the aristocrats, the elite, the liberal elite in their academic world, somehow they think they're so much smarter than everybody else, right? They think that only they can figure out why this was good because they look down on the average American as if they're so much better. That's why Democrats always want to take care of people because they think people are idiots. They think people are too dumb, to know how to run their lives. So the government has to protect them and make decisions for them in every aspect of their lives. And in that respect, I trust the public. I trust individuals to make their own decisions. I just don't want them making my decision.
Right.
I want to make decisions for myself, and I want other people to make decisions for themselves. But the liberals want to make decisions for everybody else because they think they're smarter than everybody else.
Yeah, and as we've seen over and over again, nothing could be further from the truth. And the liberals hold basically everybody in contempt, regardless who you are, right? Mm-hmm. So we got more of the same to look forward to. And then you wrote an article today, appeared in an editorial in the Washington Times about the Fed seeking to reflate the economy and 2% inflation. Now that we're not achieving that, there's something drastically wrong and they got to fix it, right?
Well, the idea that 2% inflation is something that you want to achieve, right? Yeah. Like, well, inflation is only 1.5 and we want to achieve 2. That's like somebody that says, look, I'm getting a B in this class, but I need to achieve a D, right? The B grade is I need a D. So what can I do to turn my B into a D, right? I mean, why would you? I mean, normally you would say, hey, we've got a B, inflation is 1.5%. Let's try to get it down to 0.5% so we can get an A, right? Yeah. Because the lower the inflation, the better. But now they're trying to pretend that low inflation is bad, right? That it needs to be at least 2%. Otherwise, the Fed needs to do something to make inflation. And again, when they're talking inflation, they're talking price increases. So why is it that prices have to go up by 2%? Why is the economy better off if the things that we need to buy are 2% more expensive every year? I mean, why are consumers served by the cost of living rising 2% every year? I mean, wouldn't it be better if the cost of living didn't go up, or even perish the thought, what if the cost of living went down? What if my grocery bills went down and my electric bill went down and my cable TV bill went down and my healthcare bill went down and my cost of sending my kid to school went down? What if all my costs went down? Wouldn't that be fantastic?
Yeah.
Well, why should the government save me from that?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that is, I guess, the definition of deflation. And hey, go back in history.
Well, that's the definition of prosperity.
Yeah.
That's how living standards go up.
Right.
It's when it's economies, you figure out a more efficient way to produce stuff. And because you can be more efficient, then the costs can come down. I mean, that's what happens. You can see that obviously in things like cell phones or, big screen TVs.
Yeah.
TVs this Christmas, 50-inch plasma TVs for $200. $200.
Yeah.
These are TVs that 10 years ago were $5,000 TVs. But are people not buying them because the price went down? No. They're buying them like hotcakes because the price went down. It was the higher prices that kept them from buying. It was the lower prices that, allowed all the demand to flourish.
Yeah.
So why would you want to stop progress? That's what the government. So you have to understand, why is there this big propaganda effort to get the public to want inflation, even though that's the last thing that they want? Because what the government really wants to do is sustain asset bubbles. It wants to keep the stock market propped up. It wants to keep the real estate market propped up. And it wants to keep monetizing U.S. government debt. They can't do do that without creating inflation. So they want to create a pretense. They don't want to be honest about why they want the inflation. So they make up this bull about how inflation is good for the economy, how it's good for the consumer, how it's necessary, and they try to make deflation as like the biggest boogeyman ever. Like it's the worst thing that can happen. Like if we let prices go down, it's going to be another Great Depression. So we in order to make sure that prices don't go down, we have to make sure that they rise by at least 2% because we want a good buffer zone. Because if prices are only rising by 1%, that's too close to the danger zone. We don't want to skate too close to the edge of the earth because if we fall into that abyss, all hell's going to break loose. This is what they're trying to say. But if you look at it, it's complete BS, and it amazes me how the media, the financial media, swallows this BS hook, line, and sinker.
I guess that's their job. And hey, go back from the time of the Constitution through 1913, had average inflation through wars, through everything else of 0.3%. And, was that so terrible? The country became very prosperous. And
and in my article, I don't even go back, back to the Stone Age, right? When we were on a gold standard. I looked at the 1960s.
Right.
And this is a time period where you still had, the Keynesians around, and you had, the Great Society era. And I looked at their monetary policy then, and we had much lower inflation in the early 1960s than we have now. Yet, despite that, the Fed was raising interest rates, and rates were much higher back then than they are now. And the Fed was tightening even as the inflation rate was well below 2%. I mean, it was below where it is now. They weren't like panicking and doing quantitative easing to prevent deflation. I mean, nobody would have ever considered something so asinine. And now it's accepted as if it's dogma, as if it's like, something that was etched in the Ten Commandments, that Moses brought it down from Mount Sinai, that, we need inflation. And if we don't have at least 2% inflation, you got to print money. Like it's written in stone by the hand of God.
Yeah, it's absurd. So now you go on mainstream media when it suits their fancy, and they're just as abusive to you as ever, and you stand your ground. And what's going to happen after the next crash here, Peter? I mean, it's coming. We all know it.
Yeah, well, sometimes they're abusive. I was on CNBC Asia yesterday and CNBC Europe, and they were very friendly to me. I was on this morning with Rick Santelli on CNBC. I always get a good interview with Rick. So there's some people, some of the fast money guys, there's some people that like to make fun of me or beat me up. And it's easier now, right? Because, hey, gold is going down and the dollar is going up and the U.S. stock market is making new highs. So Peter Schiff has got it wrong. And, of course, I always look like I'm wrong until I'm proven spectacularly right? Because I see the problems in advance, and most people are oblivious to the problems until it's too late, right? They don't see the edge of the cliff until they've fallen off it. And meanwhile, I'm warning everybody, hey, there's a cliff there, watch out, be careful, and they don't see it, so they think I don't know what I'm talking about. And then when I'm finally right, what is their response? Oh, well, you're a stop clock. Well, you've been saying that for so long, so you're bound to be right eventually, right? So you can't win, right? Either you're wrong or you got lucky.
Well, Peter, come on, let's face it. We know that housing prices always go up, right?
Yeah, well, there's a lot of things that people do, that they're wrong. And, the big thing that everybody is getting wrong right now is believing in the legitimacy of the U.S. recovery, because there is no U.S. recovery. They've inflated a bigger bubble. The economy is more dependent now than ever on that low interest rates. How could they take it away? And the amazing thing is people think that we don't need the low rates anymore. It's almost like thinking that, a drug addict doesn't need drugs, but he can stay high anyway, that he could stop taking drugs and feel just as good. It doesn't work that way. And maybe they think, well, if the Fed just raises rates slowly, well, it's not going to matter if they raise it slowly. I mean, that's what they did. That's what Greenspan did. Greenspan raised rates slowly in 2007, 2008, a measured pace. It didn't stop the housing bubble from bursting. It didn't stop the financial crisis just because they returned to normal slowly. So it's not going to work any better this time, especially when the problems are much worse now than they were under Greenspan.
Yeah, so they've got really no place to run to, no place to hide, and gold. So what's going on here with gold and silver? I mean, 3.5 years they've been really scraping bottom here?
Yeah, well, the lack of popularity of gold is just a reflection of how people think. It's the mirror image of the stock market, of the dollar. Everybody is so confident in the U.S. economy and the U.S. dollar that there's no reason to own gold. I mean, why would you own gold if you think it's a perfect world and the dollar is going to keep strengthening and there's no inflation as far as the eye can see and the U.S. economy is going to keep growing and the U.S. stock market is going to keep rising? Why would you buy gold? Right? I mean, if you're so optimistic. But of course, they shouldn't be this optimistic. They should be much more skeptical. They should be much more fearful. And of course, normally when you have a crisis, it happens when nobody expects it. Right? Generally, if everybody expects a crisis, it doesn't happen because the expectations of the crisis means that people do things to avert it from happening. But if nobody sees it coming, well, then it happens. And that's where we're headed. I think we're headed to a currency crisis, to a sovereign debt crisis, and I think the price of gold is going to skyrocket because nobody is prepared for this crisis. Everybody is prepared for the opposite. And so when they run smack in the face with reality, and they realize how wrong they were, and they're scrambling to reposition their portfolios to reflect what actually happened, not what they thought was going to happen, they need to buy gold. Well, everybody's going to want to buy it at the same time. Who's going to sell it? Nobody. Where's the gold going to come from? I don't know. Yeah. They're not going to get any of my gold. So I think prices are going to skyrocket. I think they're going to move up much faster than they went down.
Yeah. And what about something like Bitcoin? What's your take on Bitcoin?
Well, I think people were scrambling for a while for an alternative to euros and yen and dollars and, this whole idea of cryptocurrencies. There was initial a fan base there. Some of the libertarians, hard money people kind of got into it when it was obscure and nobody knew about it. And then, of course, once more people caught on to it and the price started to go up, well, then, you had a speculative mania. Now the people who bought it, became rich, and the people who didn't buy it wanted to get rich, so they started buying it. And then everybody started believing this, that, hey, this is a new money, because they had a vested interest in that happening because they were getting so wealthy if Bitcoin was more widely adopted. But then, of course, since so much money was made in Bitcoin, now you have altcoin or pure coin or Litecoin, or there's 300, 400, 500. I can't even keep track of the number of Bitcoin clones that are out there. Now you've got massive inflation in the in the digital currency world because there's so much digital currency. But the problem ultimately with Bitcoin or any digital currency is that it's a fiat digital currency because it's not backed by anything. I mean, currency needs to be backed by something. At one point, paper money was backed by gold. Now it's backed by nothing. If digital currency were backed by gold, then it would work. But if it's not backed by anything, then there's no value. It only works as long as people will accept it. But people can lose confidence in Bitcoin just as quickly as they can lose confidence in anything, because if you can't spend your Bitcoin, what can you do with it? There's nothing, zero.
Right.
Gold has an end user. Gold is used in all sorts of industries. I mean, of course, its big use is jewelry, but it's used in aviation, in consumer electronics, in dentistry, in other areas of medicine, and maybe in photography. I forget all the uses for gold. But there's no end user anywhere for a Bitcoin.
Yeah.
Right? So I think this is going to end in a disaster. I think that a lot of people are going to lose a lot of money who joined the party late. I think the highs are in. I don't think Bitcoins are going to be back above 1,000 again. I mean, it's possible, but I think it's doubtful. I think it's more likely they'll be well below 100 and above 1,000. And, as people begin to lose money in digital currencies, they're going to lose their popularity. They're going to have an image problem, a brand problem. And then I think a lot of the merchants that were taking them are going to stop taking them because it's not going to be worth it anymore, because the Bitcoin community is not going to have a lot of purchasing power. When Bitcoins were $1,000 and everybody who had them had a lot of money, merchants wanted to get a piece of the action. But I think more people are going to start, they're not going to be signing up. And again, the merchants never really took Bitcoins. They're just working through companies like BitPay, like me. I take Bitcoins at Schiff Gold. I mean, if you have Bitcoins, you can buy gold and silver through my company. Even though I never actually see the Bitcoins myself, I end up getting dollars from BitPay, but I set it up because I know there are people that have Bitcoins that might want to use them to buy gold, just like they might want to use them to buy merchandise at, overstock. But as Bitcoins lose value, the customers who have Bitcoins aren't going to have much in the way of purchasing power. And as, Bitcoins go down, right now you have far more people who are losing money in Bitcoins than who are making money. The people who are making money are the ones that bought before anybody knew about it, and they bought them really cheap. But anyone who's bought Bitcoins in the last year pretty much is losing money. And that's where most people are. Most people bought in the last year. They didn't buy 3-4 years ago. Nobody knew about them, right? Mm-hmm. And so you have all these people who have now lost money. So a year ago, the only stories anybody ever heard about Bitcoin was how much money somebody made in it. Oh, I put in $1,000 and now they're worth $1 million, right? So those were great stories, and other people wanted to get in on the action. Now the stories you hear is, yeah, I put $1,000 in a year ago and it's worth $500. Ah, shit. So who's going to want to? So this is what's happening. People are now going to be hearing from their friends about how much money they lost, and they're not going to want to go out and buy. So it's a big cyclical thing. I think it goes boom and bust. It's like a little mini bubble. You can look at it. I was calling it like tulip mania. People were saying, oh, it's gold 2.0. And I said, no, it's tulip mania 2.0. I thought it was a bubble, and I knew there were a lot of people who really wanted it to work. And ideally, I have a lot of philosophical similarities between a lot of the early supporters and people who continue to support Bitcoin. They think there's something wrong with me. They think that I'm, they think I'm just not getting it, which is the same thing I heard about from people in the .com bubble or in the real estate market. I just didn't get it. I just didn't understand the new economy or, the new normal. But I think I get it. I think the other people are blinded by the bubble. They're trapped in the bubble, and so they can't see it. And I think it's no different than any other mania.
So the question now is, what's next and what do you do? That's really the question here that so many of you want to know about, because it doesn't sound good. And of course, you can't count on the mainstream to protect you and let you know what's coming, right?
Well, absolutely. I mean, you have to think for yourselves. You're never going to get the right advice from the mainstream, because if they even knew what the right thing to do was, they're not going to tell you. So you've got to look for unconventional sources of information, which is, I think, what I'm putting out there. I think that if people follow what I am advising, they will eventually be successful. I mean, you have to be prepared, though, to be wrong before you're right, because, that's, contrarian investing, right? You're always going against the herd. You're always doing the opposite of what the majority of people are doing. But prices are always determined by what the majority of people are doing. So if the majority of people want to buy something, the price is going to go up, right? Mm-hmm. And if they don't want to buy something or they want to sell something, the price is going to go down. And so if you know that what the majority is buying is too expensive, and so you don't buy it, that doesn't mean it's going to stop going up, because other people haven't figured out what you know. The same thing, I'm going down. If I'm buying gold because I know it's cheap, but everybody else thinks it's expensive, but and most people are selling, then I have to be prepared for the price to go down. But what I'm investing for is the future, right? You want to figure out where everybody is going to be, and then you want to get there first. So if I know that people are going to be surprised by lots of inflation and a weak economy and QE4, what are they going to want to buy when they figure this out? Well, they're going to want to buy gold. Okay, well, I want to own it first, so theoretically I can sell it to them or not sell it to them, and and let the price go up.
Mm-hmm. Well, you think they'll be buying real estate too?
No, I think real estate is already overowned by speculators. And, the average guy, people that are buying houses to live in them, they're not doing that anymore because they're broke. If you look at individual home ownership, the levels have fallen to, generational lows. What's been fueling the housing bubble this time around is spec money. People, paying all cash for, spec homes that they're hoping to rent out and flip. And so I think that you're going to have more speculative selling of real estate, not buying.
Right. All right. Well, time's up. So just tell us where we find you, how we find out more about Euro Pacific. And
well, of course, you can buy gold from me, physical gold and silver, at Schiff Gold. Schiffgold.com is our website. It's my last name, Schiff Gold. If you're interested in helping us build you a diversified portfolio of foreign stocks and bonds, which I certainly recommend. You can't have all your money in gold, some percent, but the majority of it should be invested wisely in carefully selected foreign equities, especially ones that pay good dividends in countries like New Zealand or Norway or Singapore or Switzerland, places that we think are relatively better than, other places. And there you can look me up at europac.net is the URL for my brokerage firm, EUROPAC.net. And if you live outside the United States and you're not an American citizen, you can work with me through my offshore bank, Euro Pacific Bank. It's Europac Bank, EUROPACbank.com. So you can invest with me through my offshore bank or through my U.S. broker-dealer at europac.net. And again, I'm out there. Check out my my video blogs on YouTube, on Schiff Report. Go to schiffradio.com. You can follow my podcast. I stopped doing my radio show, but I'm doing podcasts now. I put out a lot of material every week. People can not only get it from Schiff Radio or YouTube, but they can go to iTunes and grab it, or other places that have podcasts.
All right. Sounds good. And of course, you'll find all those links in the show notes to this interview on financialsurvivalnetwork.com. Peter, thanks so much. And it's going to get interesting quick, I have a feeling.
Yeah. Well, thanks a lot, Kerry.
FSN Radio. It's all about what's next. Go to financialsurvivalnetwork.com and sign up for your free weekly newsletter. You'll also get 3 free reports. The Financial Survival Network. It's all about what's next.